we are witnessing a new era of work. How is that affecting leadership values, and how we can understand values at workplace as well?
Well, I mean, you're right in pointing out that this is, unprecedented times. My perspective is that there needs to be a new view or lens or definition of leadership. Mm-hmm. Leadership is the ability to create success stories. That means you have to do it through people, right? You have to inspire individuals and you have to empower teams. We're all parts of teams. And what is needed in a world where in this summit, the topic is transformation, digital transformation, energy transition, continuing to reform society, all these great things. Mm-hmm. But transformation is hard to do, right? It's more difficult and more easy for people to say no. So I think the role of leadership in these days is to actually manage towards those types of followership, inspiration, as well as sort of empowering the teams. What's making it very difficult, of course, is everything in the workplace has changed. The nature of work has changed, mm-hmm. the nature of the workplace, where you actually sit, the nature of the workforce, and of course the worker themselves. I mean, there's a whole next generation. So the role of leadership in the workplace now is to actually listen to that, adapt to those trends, and be much more relevant for inspiring and empowering the generations of workers that you have under your influence.
Mm-hmm. So, how leaders should redesign their management models to achieve or to follow this transformation, the new generation mindset and new workers and employees mindset, and also the workplace values?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of building blocks. The speaker before talked about things that you can't control, mm-hmm. things that you have to forecast. You have vague definitions of the future, all kinds of stress and anxiety. I think the purpose of the leader in the new workplace is to actually focus on the things you can control. Mm-hmm. So the prime piece is to communicate reality, authenticity, communicate regularly, communicate purpose, communicate availability, and define what is needed for success. So the things you can control is the culture. Are people in your company and the teams that you influence, do they feel like they belong? Do they feel respected? Do they feel safe, psychologically as well as physically and medically? Mm. Are they seen and supported, not just in identity, but also individuality? Because most diversity, as we know, is actually invisible. It's not race or gender, et cetera. But more importantly, I think it's important for leaders to actually inspire, to actually believe that you and they are in a common purpose to transform this economy, to make the energy transition, to adapt digital and AI in a very sensible and humane way. So a part of what's needed is the leader themselves need to represent a broader purpose that maps to the individual purpose. Mm-hmm. In my book, I talk about the notion of joy. Yeah. Which is, to me, shorthand for a lot of things: engagement, belonging, teamwork, winning spirit. And why would you settle for anything less than that? And leaders today, I think, need to communicate that you should not settle for anything less than that. You should be in a company that you're excited in the morning to go to, that time passes quickly because you're in the right moment, you're doing the right thing. And I think leaders need to find a way to make that environment happen.
Are we heading there?
Excuse me?
Are we heading to this? Does this exist now? I think there's happiness and joy at workplace?
Well, listen, we did some research at the beginning, this few years before COVID, and it was quite surprising. We asked people, how many of you think and want to have joy at work? And how many of you actually have it? Mm-hmm. We looked at across countries, generations, so Generation Z as well as baby boomers like myself, and across geographies. And there was a 50% gap in every situation. Mm-hmm. So the starting point is not great. And certainly what happened since then, since that research, we updated it after COVID, was that we're not where we need to be in terms of creating a workplace of what I call ABCs, allyship, belonging, and culture, which I think is a higher version of diversity, equity, inclusion, because it's more human.
Oh.
It's more real. So, I mean, I lead a professional services company. It's global. It's as diverse, every generation, every geography, every topic, every issue of ambition versus, pressure and stress. And, we're not perfect either, but I can say the lessons that we learned in the research, leaders, all they can do is try to be their best and apply that. I mean, one of the things we talked about earlier was, is there a new leadership model given this? Because, we have opportunities to improve, more is needed, more is possible. If you have the right leaders and the right purpose, institutional and individual, you got a shot. And so I think it's important for us to keep focusing on a leadership model which is maybe different than the historic command and control. The leader knows everything. The leader will set the strategy, and then you execute. Well, we all realize that
We're going to witness the end of the hierarchy.
It's not the end of hierarchy. I think it's more about the elevation of roles. What's more important in the new way of work, I think, is roles versus titles.
Yeah.
Typically, and I've seen many different types of companies and situations, countries going through a change, it's usually not the top of the company that doesn't get it. And it's not the new generation because they believe that all the changes need to be done faster and bolder.
Yeah.
Look at all the problems that Alex created. The problem in any change journey, in any transformation, in any rejuvenation is moving the middle. It's moving the broad folks in the middle who think it's just too hard. Yes, leadership believes that's a good idea, but it's very difficult for me to transform a global supply chain or transform our energy economy from this to that, or promote people and elect people that don't look like me. So it's very easy to say no. And what happens in the middle is that people stick with their little roles and their matrix and their titles, and they resist change. So I think a part of what the new role of leadership is to simplify, delayer, take away all the metrics that are sort of getting in the way of what the real purpose of the company is. So what you see right now, and it's aided by technology, and it's aided by stress and uncertainty and a lot of turmoil and things that you can't control, is the urgency to get to the point, to empower the people, give them the solutions, give them the power, give them the funding, but let them find their way. And I think leaders need to be able to listen, apply, and share versus direct and tell. They need to get people to solve the problems.
Necessarily that we're going or heading towards a flatter organization structures in work?
I think flat is, structure should follow strategy. Flat is an outcome of agility and a sense of transparency, of connectedness. So it's not lines and boxes on a page and what the organization chart looks like. It's how the company really works. So the answer to your question is we should have flatter companies. The best organizations, the best teams, whether they are sports teams in the World Cup or professional football, are teams that know their roles, they respect each other for what they bring, they're not as title sensitive, and they have a common purpose. They want to win championships, or they want to be number one, or they want to be the role model, smart and safe city in the world. These are the things that will accomplish the delayering, the decomplexifying, and the de-hierarchization, as you point out, of many companies. There's many companies that have big company disease, I call it. It's just too complicated. Why is it like this? Tech companies are like that now. They tend to be, the startup culture, and people try to be, let's be more like Silicon Valley, let's be more like.
But the tech companies, they were the dream until the latest layoffs, mass layoffs actually. It hit the world, and it hit especially the new generation and new workers. how did you see it? And how it will impact also the other companies and organizations around the world who are seeing those tech companies and big tech companies as the heaven of workplace?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think disruption is a part of any competitive system. So, I mean, you see layoffs in any sector where the skills, the needs, the strategy changes. So I think in the tech sector itself, which is a sector I spent a lot of time in, I mean, over time, structurally, it's a growth sector. It has been, is now, will continue to be. There'll be shifts in what aspects of that will be overemploying, employing, hiring, and skilling.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second piece of what you ask, I think, is also, you know, we need to have a world where the new generation of workers, and there's such a tidal wave of a next generation of worker out there, needs to feel that they will have lifelong employability, not lifelong employment at one company. So they will be going to companies like tech companies that train them, that give them skills, that make them more confident in taking risks, that make them maybe one day an entrepreneur or a financier.
They invest in them.
We have to create the right conditions for that type of followership. We have to address the next generation wants to learn. And we have to create learning organizations and learning environments. And it's okay to shift jobs. In fact, it's better to create new jobs and new roles within the same company. Why not stay in the same company and address your curiosity and your learning and your need to develop new skills as opposed to job hopping from one country or one sector to another? I think there's a bit of impatience in the Generation Zs. It's well placed, it's well intentioned, but for us as leaders of organizations and countries and sectors and companies, we need to create a better environment to retain and excite and inspire the new workers. Because there's a whole set of possibilities that are possible when you can get them to unleash that people power.
Is it easy? Because in general, you can't give people everything, and you don't know if the workers or employees in general want like more money, more praise, more chances, challenges, stability.
Well, listen, I mean, it's tough, right? You know, more is needed, but more I think is possible. So I'm a much more optimistic lens on the problem. I mean, it's a challenge, it's something we all need. We all want to transform. We all want to rejuvenate. So that's not going to change. So we're going to have to adapt ourselves to the reality of that. There's a framework in the book that I talked about, which is, it's the old Japanese concept of ikigai, which is you have to distinguish between what you're passionate about versus what you can get paid for, and what the world needs and what you're good at. And the mistake that many people of all ages and sectors make is they focus on one thing. I'm not getting paid enough. I'm underappreciated. Or I'm unfulfilled in my work, even though I'm getting paid a lot. Or the world needs this, but I can't pay for my lunch. So I think the key is to avoid stress and be yourself by actually managing all four dimensions and making your own choice. Each person is an individual. And I think if leaders can respect that and allow much more career flexibility in their company, that they need to be able to address all four aspects, not just pay, but also, are we doing the right thing? Are we working in with a reasonable purpose institutionally? Are we hiring the right people who are passionate? And I think that's kind of an interesting balance that all leaders and companies need to make to be able to attract the workers in the new workplace.
I want to ask you also about the CEOs. What model of CEOs we will witness? Will they disappear, or we will have like more human, more simple, more transparent CEOs? How do you see it? How do you imagine it?
I mean, I think one of the positive byproducts from the pandemic was that it humanized all of us around the world, including CEOs. I still remember, sending my first video saying, I was in my living room, I was saying that we're all in this boat together. And I think that unleashed a sense of relief to many CEOs that they didn't have to play a role. They could just be who they are. It's okay to not know what's going on. It's okay to say that I'm not the expert on everything. I need you and us to figure this out. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to communicate. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do. So I think you're right, absolutely, that there is more of a premium now for leaders to be human, authentic, transparent, available on video, in person, be themselves. I think it's okay. And there's obviously we also had the issues of mental health that came from a pandemic, all the racial justice issues, all the geopolitical strife, war, inflation, recession, supply chain shocks. These all created a sense of mental unwellness. And from the top, it needs to be communicated that it's okay to not be okay. We all go through those things, even CEOs. And I think, to answer your question, I think there's something in that leadership model that is much more compelling and will last a lot longer if there are more CEOs that can do that. They're still under a lot of pressure. They still need to hire the right teams, but it's okay to be themselves too, I think.
It can be learned.
I think you learn by doing. I mean, we are all parts of teams. We're parts of families. And if you are a little bit higher and more experienced and more capable, maybe you are managing a team of teams. You learn at an early age and an early stage in your careers to be humble, to be learning, to be listening, to be communicating with intellectual, situational intelligence, and also to have a sense of purpose. Those things you can learn from the very beginning in your first job. And the more experiences you have, then maybe you can lead more teams of teams and be the leader of a country or a state or a sector or a company.
It can't be forced if there is like a company culture and code of conduct for every leader to come.
Excuse me, a code of
conduct.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, there's a values-based leadership that is required in all situations. I think your employees and your customers and your suppliers will only follow, in the long run, companies and leaders that have a sense of a core, of integrity, of what they believe in. And that's in not only the behaviors that are driven by values, but the behaviors become habits, and habits become culture. That's the linkage, the values all the way, and the philosophy all the way to culture, which is what you live day to day in reality in all the companies that you're in.
I'm going to end with this question to you, Mr. Alex, is what's the relationship between this embracing this new model and these values and the productivity?
Well, I think there's a huge business case for joy at work, having a sense of belonging, because it's pretty clear that you have happy customers. You'll have happy customers if you have happy employees and staff, because they are working with joy in their work. They're creating new products. They're providing customer service. They're getting along with each other. They're not leaving your company. They're building the culture. They're training the next generation. So it's a win-win if you can do that.
But can you guarantee the sense of responsibility?
Can you?
Sense of responsibility at the employees?
I think again, this is where the notion of purpose and being a true believer that you're in the right place in the right company will create a sense of obligation and ownership and accountability and, as you point out, responsibility. You'll do the right thing for your customers if you know that you believe in your product, right? If you believe in your leadership, you believe in your customer service program. So there's a huge business case for that type of joy, belonging, and engagement and that model. There's a human case for that model, I think, as well, because why would you settle for anything less? I mean, you're born happy. Why shouldn't you be at work happy?
Yes.
And there's a leadership model for representing that this is probably a better place to be than worrying about stress all by yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Alex Liu, managing partner and chairman of Kearney. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.